Hello, welcome back everyone. This is a very hot day in Toronto, 35 degrees, the hottest in living memory, and last week we had the greatest floods in living memory, so there's a lot of ups and downs happening. Also, I want to announce that in a couple of days there will be the famous Tesla event to commemorate Tesla's birthday. So this Thursday, 2 days from now, in North York City Chambers, the Tesla event, and there will be many different speakers, one of whom will be myself. I'll be talking about Tesla as an example of an autistic savant, because he had many savant and autistic characteristics that I'll go into in some detail on Thursday night. So also I want to draw your attention, we're going to be talking about Chapter 11, which is about time, and it's about time to talk about time. It turns out that last month's issue of the New Scientist was about space and time. And you know, we don't know what space is, we don't know what time is, and we don't know what gravity is. So we're going to be talking about that tonight, all of those events. And as we're going through this book again, The Source Field Investigation by David Wilcock, and we're entering Chapter 11. You may wonder what this light here is at my side. I brought this because it's very relevant to tonight's talk. This is the famous REG, Random Event Generator of Princeton University, the Anomalous Research Laboratory. These are the random event generators that are all around the world, and they're feeding into Princeton University. There were 37 of them responded simultaneously to 9/11 that morning. They all responded, and they all have a quantum device inside here that's connected up to Princeton University. And this is one version you can buy on the internet. It's called the Mind Lamp, and it responds to prevailing consciousness. And I've made my own version of it using a crystal. And the colors change according to prevailing consciousness. The other thing I want to show to you, I now have available the famous 380 nanometer wavelength healing energy. This has been mentioned many times now during the book. I won't look at this directly because it's not good to look at UVA, but this is the healing carrier wavelength upon which you want to have the healing information, the intention or the picture. So what we do is, if you look back to earlier chapters, you shine this ultraviolet light, 380 nanometers, on a healthy organ and reflect that light onto a damaged or ill organ like a liver or a breast tumor, and the DNA of will pick up the healing energy and will be repaired according to the research that's been done. So, and these light sources of 380 nanometers, I now have a source for them, I make them, and I have them available for sale. Not on my website yet, but call me or email me to find out more about how you can get one of these. They also should be pulsed. Pulsing light magnifies the power many, many times, so that's going to be important. I think that covers all of the essential things before we move on to the meat of the evening, which is Chapter 11. And the kind of movement we are talking about in this course is the movement described in the Source Field Investigation by David Wilcock. And this book is so encyclopedic that we're using it as a base for this course. My intention is to help you read it and get through it, because there's a lot of material here. It also helps me to deepen my understanding of phenomena that I was not aware of. I'm quite astounded at some of the information that's here. So let's move ahead now, and we are looking for evidence, scientific evidence, for the existence of this field that has been called the ether zero-point energy quantum foam. So, and David Wilcock has done an incredible job of pulling together hundreds of high-quality scientific articles that you'll read in the back. Every chapter is well supported by scientific references, so this is not idle speculation. So this is a scientific document of very high caliber. So the field, this source field that pervades all of reality, affects our thoughts, and our thoughts in turn feed back to affect the higher dimensions of the Akashic subquantum dimensions. We also know that all healing comes from this field. All order, beauty, music, mathematical equations, as you'll see later in this chapter, all changes of DNA. DNA follows certain prescriptions and patterns and templates that are downloaded, are being flowing all the time through the higher dimensions from the subquantum matrix, where all information is stored. And the information is carried on carrier waves, such as energy, such as light. And we learned last time about the power of ultraviolet light. I just happened to bring with me, if you recall, we talked about the importance of violet light or ultraviolet light around 380 nanometers. I now have obtained that this is ultraviolet light of 380 nanometers. I'm not looking at it directly, so it's quite safe, but it's quite safe to look at it through the TV screen. This is the famous 380 nanometers, highly precise and pure, that seems to be the basis of all healing. And it's this ultraviolet A wavelength that is so important as a carrier for healing. And as I say, it's just a carrier, and the healing information is perhaps up to us and our intention. So here's an example of it. If any of you want these 380 nanometer lights, call me. I sell them now as of a couple of weeks ago. You might also wonder what this light is at the side and this crystal. These are the REGs that I'm going to talk about in the next chapter, random event generators that Professor Nelson and John of the PEAR group, Princeton Engineering Anomalous Research Laboratory, Princeton University, they have these all over the world connected up to computers, detecting emotional and psychological events on the planet. And these are examples of these. You can buy these from Celeron, as I did. I bought 2 of them. And one comes, this is called the Mind Lamp. And this, I put a crystal on it. And the colors change according to the prevailing emotion and prevailing spirituality. So you see this changing as we go through the evening. But they respond particularly to groups carrying out spiritual rituals.
Is this like a mood ring?
It's like a mood ring. These are mood lights, you know,
so,
but based on quantum mechanical technology.
So what do you make of the combination of the 2 colors?
Well, that's, people say, well, why aren't they both the same color? Why is this one violet, purple, and why is this one yellow? Because they're tuning into different aspects. It's like a unique personality. That's the best way I can explain it. It's not just a piece of electronics. It's much more than that. It's a quantum device, a random noise generator generating it from quantum mechanical phenomena. So they each have their own unique personality that we don't understand yet, but they do change in accordance to prevailing influences. Yeah.
So when you say random noise, is that the same as random event generator? Is that the same thing?
Yes. Random events happen event by event by event, slowly, like over minutes or hours or seconds. Whereas random noise, like white noise, like in electronics or sound, you have white noise. White noise is a very, very high frequency signal that is jittering around at a very high rate, and that the white means that it has an infinite spectrum that goes from minus infinity to plus infinity. So it contains all frequencies, and in so doing, it creates all possibilities. That's why randomness is a key to spirituality that we'll discuss in later chapters. That randomness allows for any possibility. And Einstein, if you recall, refused to believe this, refused to believe that at a quantum level everything was random, because it looks so solid and everything looks so smooth that we cannot see it. But if you recall that in a movie or a TV screen, it's actually flashing in front of your eyes 32 times a second, 32 being just above the flicker fusion frequency. So we don't see, we don't perceive that. But if you looked at our brain waves, you'd be seeing the pulses at 32 hertz. So it may not be such a good thing that we have these fluorescent lights and TV screens all pulsing our brain, although we're not aware of it. So there are a lot of things happening at high frequencies that we're not aware of. You know. And Einstein said, God does not play dice with the universe. He refused to believe that there was randomness at the fundamental depth of reality. But now we know he was wrong. He made some other mistakes too. He made a mistake about the ether. At first he said there was no ether, but then later on, around 1920, in fact, he very, very emphatically contradicted himself. He said, no, that's not true. The universe is unthinkable without an ether. We need an ether for light to pass through, to carry light and other energies. So let's move on now to a famous scientist, Professor Schnoll, S-C-H-N-O-L-L, in 1985. He discovered this quantum phenomena in all processes throughout the world. He looked at every kind of electrical, chemical, physical process and found that it occurred not in smoothness, but at a fundamental level. There was on, off, on, all on, all off, all on, like a random noise effect at the quantum level, flickering in and out, he called it, but appearing smooth on the surface at a grosser level, seamless like a movie, but yet fundamentally incremental. The flickering random excursion waveforms, but the most phenomenal thing is that they repeat themselves all over the world and perhaps all over the universe, in that the flickering is happening instantaneously throughout all of the universe. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So if you examine any process at a given time, you'll find correlation between all processes at that same time throughout the universe.
They're all jumping and quivering at the same, on, off at the same times. And if you were to plot the graph of each of them, they'd all be doing the same thing simultaneously, showing that there's a simultaneous time influence, pulsing time influence, pervading perhaps the whole universe.
So like a master clock?
A master clock, yeah. So perhaps the little jumps are like quanta or chronons, time particles, quanta of time. So they replicate simultaneously all over the world. It's called the global field noise. And perhaps it's a field of time that is, time is speeding up and slowing down in these incremental steps that we cannot see grossly, but need very sensitive instruments. Interestingly, there was a Toronto scientist, Sid Hurwitz. This is in page 223 of the book. In 1970, he developed a device which he said was really quite simple, which changed the flow of time locally. It speeded up time, and he later gave it to the state of Israel, who we think used it in the Entebbe raid and other great daring escapades. Hurwitz invented this, but later gave it to the state of Israel, and he was highly honored by Israel for this gift, which they appreciated and highly valued. We don't know what Hurwitz's instrument was, how he said it was some kind of magnetic device that was based on fairly simple principles. So perhaps David Wilcock might find out and see if we can perhaps reduplicate Hurwitz's work.
John, you might want to go into slightly more in depth into his presentation to the law enforcement people.
That's right. He was in law enforcement and protect security, and he invited a group of security and police people to his home for a demonstration, and they found that they couldn't operate their firearms because they couldn't. Time had changed; they couldn't pull the trigger enough to activate the trigger.
And then when they looked at their clocks, at their watches,
there was a 25-minute delay in that time had speeded up, so 25 minutes had taken place in their time, whereas in outer time it was only a few minutes. So we often get this speeding up of time locally. Another example is in the twin paradox. When the faster you move, the faster time speeds up. So you get this twin paradox. So relativity, which Einstein gave us in 1905 with his 3 papers, general relativity, shows that time is not universally constant. Time is locally dependent on the velocity or speed you're moving at. So time is not universal. Movement changes time, and it's been proven even at simple levels, taking an aircraft around the Earth. It has been shown that the clocks on board will gain a little bit of time, not a whole lot because they're not moving at near the speed of light. One plane gained 275 nanoseconds, and when it went the other direction, it lost a few nanoseconds. So there is a measurable time difference even at these low speeds. However, near the velocity of light, time moves much, much faster. And the question arises, is it just time, or does mass change? Mass becomes heavier and greater and infinite. So it takes infinite energy to move any mass at the speed of light. So we want to talk a bit about this ether, which pervades all of the universe. And from what we know now from the work of many scientists, such as Laszlo, I would recommend you read some of the work of Erwin Laszlo, very readable material about the Akashic dimensions. He's a quantum physicist. The ether science tells us that space has properties based on the subquantum lattice or matrix. And in 1920, Einstein confirmed this, that the ether was necessary for the propagation of light and for powering time. So time emerges out of the ether. Time may be a structured local region that we can return to, come back to the same structure of time. And it seems, according to what David Wilcox tells us, that the Earth, when it returns back in its orbit to the same time a day later or a year later, similar patterns begin to manifest. And we can return to that same location in time. Professor Schnall discovered that repeated patterns are based on movements of the Earth and the Moon, and that they in turn can change time. There are some anomalies of time that are not just at the nanometer level, but they're macroscopic, in that we can see them. Space probes have been demonstrated to slowing down depending on their direction of travel. 7 space probes have been slowing down, and NASA doesn't understand why. It seems that they're affected by time being affected by local planets and the sun and the moon. They are affecting the speed of time that is changing the speed of the 7 space probes. So, moving on to the effects of the sun, because we are bathed in the energy of the sun all the time. The solar cycles, the cycling of the sun. This is on page 231. Sunspot activity is far more significant to us than we realize, has profound effects upon us. Very, very important reading. I would recommend you read about this, how increasing sunspot activity causes adverse human behavior, wars, and other problems for humanity. So when sunspot activity was the highest, 80% of all negative events and crimes and wars and revolutions took place demonstrations, including the Russian Revolution of 1917, happened at a time of great sunspot activity. And the scientist who discovered this and presented it was rewarded by 30 years in jail for daring to suggest that the Russian Revolution was based on sunspot activity. So they wanted to think, the Russians wanted to think that it was due to some high-minded decision making. They didn't want to believe that it had something to do with things totally out of their control. So this scientist had studied the patterns dating back 2,500 years, and he shows there are graphs in Wilcox's book here how these cycles have corresponded to major events. So it's unfortunate this scientist had to spend 30 years in a Soviet prison camp for this discovery. The solar activity is also correlated with the length of the day and also changes in the flow of time. Maybe the time changes are causing the solar activity, and the solar activity in turn causing further time changes. This is very common in the universe. We got circular feedback loops, one thing feeding another, and then positive feedback recreating it to a higher degree, and then you get out of control oscillations and explosions very often. Another thing that's often thought to be a source of change in time is the retrograde movement of the planet Mercury, and that is associated with electrical and mechanical disruptions, and also with emotional problems in many people. This retrograde, some people are very sensitive to Mercury, and perhaps other planets too, in more subtle ways that we don't fully understand. Interestingly, there were studies done on the rate of radioactive decay of radioactive substances and elements, and these were studied at Stanford University and Purdue University in the USA. Normally, the rate of decay would be relatively constant, but it turns out that's not the case. There's speeding up and slowing down. The rate decreased during summer and increased during winter. And there were also repetitive cycles, and delay rates of 33 days was a frequent cycle, which matched apparently the rotation of the core of the sun, which also rotates 33 days. So the core of the sun and perhaps the core of the earth are having profound effects on cyclical effects on time and periodic changes in our biology. Also, something that I think is even more important for many of us who are spiritually directed and life workers, the effects on psychic ability changes. Psychic ability is called anomalous cognition by psychologists. In almost 3,000 trials with psychic people, more solar activity caused a reduction in their psychic ability. So that's something to be aware of when you're trying to predict or to channel psychic information. I'm a great believer in channeled material. I've seen so much high quality material. One of my favorite channels is Cryon. Another was Lazarus. So you can learn a lot from a lot of this downloaded material.
I have a general question for you about sun activity. Is there anywhere we can go, like the internet, to figure out what's happening with the sun, to know anything in advance?
Yeah, I think a good source is David Wilcox's book, right at the back. I'm very impressed by a lot of the scientific references that are relevant to what we're talking about right now. So those would be the first places to go.
Okay.
Yeah, he's done the homework. For us, that's just why all Gary and I have to do is convey it to you in a more palatable, digestible form. Yeah. Okay, moving on now to page 236 is discussion of this global consciousness project, of which this mind lamp is a part. This global consciousness project was set up at Princeton University by Dr. Roger Nelson and Dr. Robert Jan, who use these electronic noise generators that are based on quantum mechanical devices, tunnel diodes and Zener diodes that go through quantum phenomena. And therefore quantum phenomena are more likely to be influenced and susceptible to prevailing quantal and subquantal influences. So that is why these have been so important. So they're looking for patterns or orders in the randomness. And whenever a change in the pattern happens, then you get a change in the light. It changes to a different color of the light. When there's a recognizable change or pattern in the order of the randomness. So it's not fully random. Hidden in that random there is order, and that's called chaos. And these are called the REG, Random Event Generator, and they respond more to when groups of people have a ritual designed to bring people into a shared state of consciousness. A love, field of love, it has the most profound effect upon these devices. And they found that the random event generators all around the world now, there are many of them, and they all respond simultaneously, and all their information is fed through the internet to Princeton University. They responded to the following situations. The Academy Awards showed up strongly. The O.J. Simpson trial, 5 separate REGs simultaneously showed responses during the O.J. Simpson. Princess Diana's funeral, 12 of these devices showed simultaneous changes. And by the year 2001, there were 37 functioning REG devices running 24 hours a day. All of them responded without fail on September the 11th, namely 9/11. They all responded to 9/11 around that critical time of 6 a.m. to 10 a.m.
Do you think they're responding to the state of human consciousness?
They're responding obviously to human consciousness before, during, and afterwards around that 9/11 event. And they found the effects were stronger in those devices that were closer to New York City. It seems that the combined power of our thoughts and our collective consciousness not only changes these, but can also change the Earth's magnetic field, which is also being monitored by another group of scientists. And this has been reported by Greg Braden in his book, Fractal Time. You get spikes and changes in the magnetic field of the Earth, changes of the order of about 50 nanotesla, which is about 1/50,000th of a Gauss. Half a Gauss is the Earth's magnetic field. So it's a small change in that total field.
So does that correlate with the changes in the those 37
Yes.
readers?
So not only with the 37 REGs, random event generators, but the magnetic field as detected by magnetometers separately also showed spikes at that time of 9/11.
That's interesting. This could be a good time for us to wind down into our commercial break.
Yes, it's half an hour now. We'll have a break and then we'll rejoin you very shortly. Thank you. My name is John Stewart, President of Biophysica, Inc., and a biomedical engineer. We make the world's most advanced colloidal generators for domestic and industrial quantities of mineralized waters. Many bottling plants worldwide use our generators to make colloidal silver, the world's most life-saving antimicrobial supplement, as well as colloidal zinc, gold, magnesium, copper, iron, etc. Biophysica advanced generators produce the smallest nanomolecules to ensure potency against the smallest, most vicious viruses. A Biophysica colloidal generator will give your family the best quality colloidal silver for many years, quickly, cheaply, and easily. Contact us at biophysica.com or call us at 416-636-5804. Welcome back, everyone, after the break. The bagpipes helps remind me of my home in Scotland. And as you may know, the Stuarts are the royal family of Scotland. And when we separate, I'm hoping to be invited back to be king. So moving on now.
We were going to talk about your business here.
Right, yeah, we have something we want to share with you.
Yeah, this is about electronic water treatment, descaling and softening. These products that you make to help with especially descaling. Can you elaborate on this?
Yeah, it turns out that water responds to magnetic fields just like the human body does. It was a logical extension from my work in healing. Magnetic fields were first used to heal bone fractures and then soft tissue injuries and to stimulate healing in other kinds of damage like in the brain. For example, in Alzheimer's, magnetic pulses have been shown to help in Alzheimer's disease, to help in perhaps autism, in stroke, and in depression as an alternative to electric shock treatment. Now we're using magnetic shock treatment, magnetic pulses that affect the brain, and presumably they're affecting the water in the brain, because water is the carrier of all messages and energy. But it turns out that in industry, that same water responds to magnetic pulses of specific range of frequencies, which I've now been working on for over 20 years. And I invent and have and sell magnetic generators that put through coils of wire using the pipe. The water pipe is like the secondary of a transformer, the coil being the primary, inducing these high frequencies to run up and down the length of the water pipe. And it's amazing that these high frequencies can go up and down about half a kilometer in either direction. And two things happen. One, it creates a Zeta Potential, which is an electrical charge on each nanocluster or molecule of the dissolved or colloidal substance. Like the three ones are silica, magnesium, calcium. They're the ones that become adhesive. They stick to the side walls of the pipe, as they maybe do in our bodies and our arteries, to create atherosclerosis. So they block the pipes, but the magnetic pulses put a charge on the particles so that they repel each other, and they're no longer adhesive. And so that, number one, they stop sticking. Number two, they abrade. Old scale gets rubbed off slowly over 1 or 2 or 3 months. So you can end up cleaning out all the pipes in miles of pipe in a power station, for example. Otherwise, you'd have to replace all the pipes. So this way, you can non-invasively clean out all of that scale that can stick onto the sides of pipes and onto heating elements and valves.
So this would be a great return on your investment.
Tremendous return. Non-invasive, you don't even have to cut into the pipe. So here's a diagram of, on the left side, you'll see the green cable wound round a foot length of pipe, and we put a range of specific frequencies through that coil from the generator box, varying powers depending on the diameter of the pipe, say a small pipe up to 1/2 inch and then 1 inch, and then we have high power generators that go up to 10-inch and 12-inch or more diameter for major power stations. I have had some clients, for example, dairy farmers were recently in the mid-US states. Beer breweries, they have a problem with passing water around, or distilleries where the water is very hard in a lot of these areas. So that's one of the areas I wanted to talk about, the power of pulsed magnetic field in healing and in changing water.
Also, what do you mean by softening?
Yeah, the word softening means it's no longer hard. So hard means that it has dissolved calcium, magnesium, and silica, and it prevents the formation of foam and soaping. Soap will not soap, for example, in dishwashing machines. Another customer of mine They have a franchise of restaurants all over the US, so they put my unit in front of their dishwashing machine so that the soap can work. It has an effect on the water, functionally softens the water, although the dissolved minerals are still there. So the minerals don't have their hardening effect, so that the dishes come out nice and sparkly clean because of this electronic and electromagnetic softening effect. There's a word for when you have a soap on water, it creates, it lowers the surface tension remarkably. And that's another benefit of the electromagnetic effect. Yeah.
So are you saying that descaling and softening are the results of the same process?
No, they're different. One is the immediate softening happens. Descaling is a later, slower process that takes place over 1 or 2 or 3 months, where slowly the old scale is removed right down to the level of the pipe, whether it's plastic or iron or copper.
Would you, one last question about this, would you apply this to drinking water or to non-drinking water?
Well, drinking water, that's another question. Should we be drinking softened water? We should not be drinking RO water, reverse osmosis, or distilled water, because those are waters from which the minerals have been removed. We need those minerals. Silica is one of the most important minerals of our body for our bones. We need calcium for our bones. We need magnesium, crucially, and zinc. We need all of those minerals. So I would say do not drink RO water by itself unless you add in the minerals, particularly colloidal minerals. That's why these colloidal generators are so important. You make your own colloidal copper, zinc, magnesium, iron, and you add them in to your reverse osmosis or distilled water. So does that answer the question?
I'm not 100% sure whether, so you're saying do not drink water treated by this process. Is that what you're saying?
No, this process is good because it's leaving. It leaves it in. Yeah, it leaves it in, and it doesn't have any benefit for drinking. You know, there's no problem drinking hard water. The hardness has a problem on pipes and on boiler surfaces of heating elements in boilers. The heating element develops a layer of crust that prevents the heating. It creates great inefficiency, costs a lot of money, and this scaling happens within days. It's amazing how quickly scaling takes place.
So who would you say, if you could talk to the world right now, who would you ask to contact you with the problem of scaling in their systems? Who would be your number one target?
Just about all industries that use water. We're all having to use hard water because hard water is in most places in the world. There's very little soft water around because when it's lying underground, it takes in all the calcium, silica, and magnesium and zinc that's around and becomes hard, becomes what's called TDS, total dissolved solid, is carried into the water. So all industry where there's cooling involved, cooling towers and heating elements, boiling water, power stations, there's always a problem with water, hard water.
So would you say, my last question to you, would you say that using a descaling system would save you from having to replace pipes or maintain pipes for a long time?
Well, these pipes, miles of pipes in a small power station, for example, miles or a distillery or fractionating columns, these pipes get all clogged up with scale. How else can you remove the scale except by removing the pipes, replacing them at enormous cost and expense? Whereas if you can do this just by wrapping a coil and the right frequencies, and it doesn't take a lot of power, like 100 watts of power from like an ordinary light bulb is sufficient for a 10-inch diameter pipe. So it's a no-brainer
Well, thank you for that.
Talking about no-brainers, from last time, if you remember the picture of the, did we show that last time? The picture of the no-brainer, the civil servant who had no brain. No, that's from my lecture on savants. The question was, is the brain necessary? And there's this famous picture, I think it's later on in the source field, picture of a civil servant who had no brain. They did an X-ray and found that it was full of fluid. So how could he function? Also, another young man got an advanced honors degree in mathematics and had no brain. And we will talk about that in another discussion on savants. So let's move on now to finish off chapter 11. Other strong effects with the REG, the random event generator, other strong effects were on the Obama inauguration. When he won the presidential election, there was a very strong effect. And then again, during his inauguration. So our thoughts do affect one another, and the prevailing thoughts around those events, the collective consciousness, showed up on these random event generators. And then one other final thing on this chapter is these conflicts show up as in one direction and positive events show up in another. So it's like white light and dark light, or matter and antimatter. There's an opposing polarity of randomness. These random generators can discriminate between positive events and so-called negative conflictual events. A good source for this is Professor Claude Swanson's book, The Synchronized Universe. I have one of his other books on fields and waves. Very good reading, Claude Swanson. We're ready to move on now after the chapter 11. So I hope none of you go into chapter 11. That's a joke, by the way. Even Scotsmen can have jokes sometimes. Okay, we're moving on to gravity and gravitation. And what is gravity? Again, we don't know what gravity is. We don't know if gravity is pulling us to the earth or pushing us. We always knew that gravity sucks, but apparently gravity is a push. So it turns out, as Einstein very emphatically told us later in his life, that empty space is not empty. It's full of energy called the ether, or called the 0 point, or dark energy, or quantum foam, or the subquantum matrix, or there are many names for this field, or the Holy Spirit in religious groups, where this energy is flowing. It has a flowing effect as it pours in to our dimension, bringing with it these benefits that throughout history were thought of as divine benefits of this spiritual force field that caused healing and love and art and music and order. So no wonder it was thought to be the muses, something of angelic gift. We also have proposed, and I've known this for a long time, that the elementary particles, like the electrons spinning around the atom, to be spinning forever and never decaying, they have to be being fed from somewhere, from some energy source. So the electron is spinning in its different orbital heights and levels, and the proton and the neutron, they would decay if they weren't being fed, not only by raw energy, but by information patterns that tell the electrons what orbit to go into, and to tell one atom how to interact with another atom. And some atoms will not interact with other atoms, and some will. Like sodium is a very, very reactive element, pure sodium. Pure chlorine is another very, very reactive element. One is positive, the other is negative. And when they come together, they form an extremely stable combination called sodium chloride, or table salt, one of the most stable salts presumably in the universe, coming from two highly unstable sources. So the atoms are dictated as to how they interact with each other or not. Some elements will not interact with each other, presumably because of the information fields that allow or disallow those interactions. All life forms, we now know, absorb photons or virtual photons into our DNA in order to survive. That we need not only light, which is true photons, but we also need the virtual photons, the hidden photons of the subquantum field of the quantum matrix that are feeding, of the source field, in other words, that are feeding us all the time. We call it love energy, or life force. We need it every nanosecond, every moment, every Planck time interval. We need that love energy, that life force all the time. And it seems to come in forms of vortices, not perhaps as a ray or a beam, but it seems to predominate in vortices or other shapes, which is why the Platonic solids that we'll discuss later are so important. All these preferred patterns are the ways that the life force manifests and flow into us. The most popular or prominent ones being the pyramidal shape. And remember too that the wavelength is important. This 380 nanometer wavelength that we've read so much about seems to be an important carrier of this information, this healing information. So these 380 nanometer lights are available. I'm now selling these. They're not on my website yet.
Can you use these for self-healing, for self-treatment of
You
any
can
kind?
use them for self-healing. You see, if you look back at some of the Russian scientists, if we use this 380 nanometers as a carrier wave, we have to have an image, we have to have a message that goes on this. This light is just pure energy. It's not going to do a whole lot. We've got to have, say, a picture of a healthy organ. Like if you are trying to heal breast cancer, for example, you could have a healthy breast, either on one individual or another, and reflect the image of that through a front surface mirror, not through glass, remember, but through a front surface mirror, reflect that image riding on the 380 nanometer ultraviolet light.
What if it's an internal organ, like my liver?
Just doesn't matter. It goes into the DNA.
So how do I get a liver?
So if you get a good liver signal, and this is back in the early chapters of this book, how to get a good liver signal, a good organ signal, when they changed the chicks and the ducks and all of that. Remember the eggs that changed? If you get a good signal or riding on your 380 nanometer and project it onto your damaged or unhealed organ, you can get healing, according to these research studies.
So could it be an actual piece of film?
It would appear so. The film is a carrier of the original healing, or a photograph. To shine the ultraviolet light on a photograph and reflect it back onto the organ that needs to be healed. Yep. That's the logic of what this is all about. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make sense by conventional science, but if it works, do it. You don't have to believe it, but if it works, let's do it. So moving on, some experts, particularly scientists like Haramain and think that the atom is a black hole. I have, for a long time, this is the Stewart hypothesis, is that the atom is a white hole. So, because I think that a white hole is something that is calling forth and bringing forth energy and information. As the electron spins around, it's acting like a white hole, pulling energy and information from somewhere else in the universe, and it's coming into and feeding the electron. Some experts think that gravity is akin to or corresponds to the strong force. The atomic strong force is gravitational. We also think that space-time is fluidic, flowing like a river of flow, flowing around that takes time, perhaps. There's a time in that flow because flow creates time, remember. And flow creates the accumulation of results and effects, accumulation of healing and flow together create time. And we think there is something more basic from which not only gravity and time emerge. Both are emergent phenomena from things that are far more basic down at the subquantal level, which, as you remember, I said was around subquantal, meaning much, much smaller than 1 nanometer. 1 nanometer is 10 to the minus 9. We're talking about 10 to the minus 20 nanometers in that subquantal dimension, which is still larger than 10 to the minus 35, which is the Planck dimension. So in that intermediate subquantal level where we think much of what's going on in the universe is happening, and all of our influences. And if we talk about God in a future talk, we would think if God were to hang out, this is where he would reside, around 10 to the minus 20. So we think too that gravity is a push. The gravity is flowing into the earth, pushing us down, not necessarily an attractive field. And gravity could be the source field that's coming from that 10 to the minus 20 nanometer dimension. A word or two about an important English scientist. This is page 245. An old friend of mine, Dr. Harold Aspden. He was one of my teachers, along with Professor Alec Laithwaite, when I was a graduate student at Imperial College in London back in 1966. I did my master's degree in biophysics and electronics at Imperial College. And Professor Eric Laithwaite lectured to us on the maglev that he had invented. But he and Harold Aspden had a secret project that they shared with us on the radiating effects of gravity. They were working with spinning flywheels, and they found that when a spinning flywheel could radiate a field to another spinning flywheel, that gravity could be radiated and could be transmitted through space. And they found that if they speeded up the flywheel, the other one began to speed up too. That there was a sympathetic link in their rotational velocity or their torsion. They called it virtual inertia. But the experiment Harold and Aspden did was that when he started a flywheel, a heavy flywheel, it took 300 joules of energy to spin it up to around 3,000 RPM, 3,250. 3,000 RPM is about the high rate of a car engine. After 5 minutes, and then they stop the flywheel, and then they wait a few minutes and start it up again. They found that instead of requiring 300 joules, it only required 30 joules, a tenth of the energy, as if there was still a virtual inertia adding to the energy of the spinning flywheel, this phantom rotational vortex. So that's something about Harold Aspden. I subsequently, in one of my visits back home, revisited Harold Aspden, who was one of my old teachers. He was then living in Winchester, near Southampton. So a group of us got together, and Harold had a party at his home, and one of my other colleagues, Dr. Kenyon, Julian Kenyon, who runs one of the world-class alternative medicine clinics, we all got together for a party at Professor Aspden's home in one of my visits during the 80s back home to Scotland, to England.
John, I suggest that this is a good time to wind down.
Okay, the time has come now. We're well into chapter 12, which is about gravity, and we're going to talk about shapes, and particularly the honeycomb shape and how it too can radiate a field. So thank you all for attending. Oh, before we do,
I also suggest that we announce the next chapter as well.
Chapter 13, Teleportation and Time Travel. And I would like to remind you about Thursday's event, the Tesla event, coming up this Thursday evening. There may be a lack of tickets. If you take my phone number, call me even right there in the event. I'll be right there. Call my number, 416-636-5804. I will have spare tickets at $10 for the Tesla event, and I'm one of the speakers. I'll be talking about Tesla as an autistic savant. So thank you. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you very much.
My name is John Stewart, President of Biophysica, Inc., and a biomedical engineer. We make the world's most advanced colloidal generators for domestic and industrial quantities of mineralized waters. Many bottling plants worldwide use our generators to make colloidal silver, the world's most life-saving antimicrobial supplement, as well as colloidal zinc, gold, magnesium, copper, iron, etc. Biophysica advanced generators produce the smallest nanomolecules to ensure potency against the smallest, most vicious viruses. A Biophysica colloidal generator will give your family the best quality colloidal silver for many years, quickly, cheaply, and easily. Contact us at biophysica.com or call us at 416-636-5804. My name is John Stewart, President of Biophysica, Inc., and a biomedical engineer. We make the world's most advanced colloidal generators for domestic and industrial quantities of mineralized waters. Many bottling plants worldwide use our generators to make colloidal silver, the world's most life-saving antimicrobial supplement, as well as colloidal zinc, gold, magnesium, copper, iron, etc. Biophysica advanced generators produce the smallest nanomolecules to ensure potency against the smallest, most vicious viruses. A Biophysica colloidal generator will give your family the best quality colloidal silver for many years, quickly, cheaply, and easily. Contact us at biophysica.com or call us at 416-636-5804. My name is John Stewart, President of Biophysica, Inc., and a biomedical engineer. We make the world's most advanced colloidal generators for domestic and industrial quantities of mineralized waters. Many bottling plants worldwide use our generators to make colloidal silver, the world's most life-saving antimicrobial supplement, as well as colloidal zinc, gold, magnesium, copper, iron, etc. Biophysica advanced generators produce the smallest nanomolecules to ensure potency against the smallest, most vicious viruses. A Biophysica colloidal generator will give your family the best quality colloidal silver for many years, quickly, cheaply, and easily. contact us at biophysica.com or call us at 416-636-5804.